Hi, everyone. It's Jen. I'm very excited to be here today with Lee Jessup. Lee Jessup and we're having lots of conversation about story and what's going on at the end of the year, and came up with this idea of sharing our excitement with you. So Lee is celebrating 10 years this year, our 2022. I am so beyond excited for Lee. I have seen success stories come through her at a very, very high level. So Lee, what would you say when you're looking at the past decade? What would you say are some of the lessons that came through?
Oh gosh, so many. And I mean, first of all, just, you know how it is. You're celebrating 15 years this year. It's just humbling to get to do what we do and to be allowed by the writing community to do this as long as we do. So let's just start with that. I come away with a lot of humility to start with, and just appreciation for an audience that has continued to want to hear what I have to say. I find that at the end of the day, the last decade reinforced some things, surprised me with some things. The lessons learned are that it almost always takes longer than anybody wants to. Breaking in is not something that happens overnight. Building a career is not something that happens from today to tomorrow, but people do it every day. And I think it's a really important, as hard as it is and as elusive as it sounds, I've seen writers break in and build careers and do things that nobody imagined possible for them. And so, I actually really stopped looking at things as, is it possible or impossible? I don't see anything as impossible. I see it as potentially improbable, but nothing is impossible. And I think that we continue to have young managers come into the business. And to me, that's a testament of new writers coming into the business, right? Because literary managers usually don't start with a big roster of big clients. They start with somebody they believe in and that they want to go fight for, and they stay in the game and they build a business. And, John Hirsch, whose writer was the #1 writer on the blacklist that was announced at the end of 2022, as it is every year. I met John 5-6 years ago through another manager friend when he started his management business and built it from nothing. And I think that you can't do that without literary talent breaking in regularly. So I know it can seem elusive and difficult and insurmountable, but writers break in every day. And I think it's just about having the support in place, because it's going to be challenging. It's having community in place because they will see you through it. It's about having relationships with people that will help you move from stage to stage. But it remains a field that I'm really excited about.
Excellent. I love that you tapped on belief, because I feel like belief is key in taking something from impossible, improbable, to it happens every day. And the dream does happen every day, and we see it happen every day. So I love the idea of that transformation and what goes into that. If you were to think about takeaways for 2022, what are some takeaways for writers?
For me, it was a lot about remembering that every path is singular. Don't compare yourself to other people, other writers, their story, their career stage, what they've done, what you've done. The elements are different, right? Everybody brings something different to the page, to the journey. So it's really important to focus on yours. As easy as it is to look sideways and say, well, this is happening to this person, why isn't it happening to me in that way? For me, 2022 was a great reminder about the viability of the film space as a platform for breaking in and getting attention. I mentioned the blacklist, a writer that I started working with at the beginning of 2022, who was unrepped and unknown to the industry in January 2022, when we started working, had the #2 script on the blacklist at the end of 2022. And it was just a reminder of how beautiful it is when you see somebody write a great script, fight for it. Yes, he won one of the script pipeline competitions. I'm a huge fan of theirs, but he did all the right things. And by the end of the year was known to the industry and had a fan base and had a producer attached to his work and material out to packaging. So it was just a reminder of the viability of the film space in terms of a vehicle into the industry, writing what you love, writing what you know, bringing your passion to the page. All of those things that we know, that we remember. It's also a writer who's been writing for a long time. So it was yet another reminder that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And even though that, I'm sure that last year had gone by faster in terms of industry attention than previous years, it is a marathon. You have to pace yourself and you have to believe that it's going to take the time that it takes. Back to that idea of faith. Right? If this is your purpose, if this is where you feel the most realized as a person, keep doing what you're doing, keep fighting for the work, keep challenging yourself as a writer. And it's amazing what can happen.
Yes. And we see it.
We do.
Now into 2023 with the new year, what are you excited about?
So for me, I start my year every year with my totally loaded coaching bundle, which I love because it's kind of the most broad and complete package that I offer. And I only offer it in January of every year. And interestingly, Elad Ziv, who ended up being on top of the blacklist, started with me last year this way. What I love about it is that it's unlimited coaching. It's also membership to Screenwriter Support Group, which Jen was an amazing guest on. It's also books and productivity tools. So it's kind of the most complete package that I bring in, which is always fun to work with writers, get to know writers really well that way, and see what we can accomplish in a year together and potentially our first year together. Many of my writers, as are yours, are ones who continue with me through many, many projects, many years. Projects with you, career with me. So it's always a great kind of beginning, right? Where you just kind of go, yes, who's going to come in, much like with you and your upcoming course, right? Who's going to come in? Who am I going to meet? Who will I get excited about? Who will I have the privilege of supporting on this journey?
And who will I celebrate? And the
who
idea.
will I celebrate? Yeah. Absolutely.
I absolutely love that. And I love that our focus complements each other so much at the level that it does. And I also love sending people to you because I love knowing your work ethic parallels with my work ethic and our desire to get people to an outcome. So I love this. All right. So also in thinking about the new year, and we know there's so much going on in the business and so much that could happen, and I want to hear you tap into that. What do you think writers should be aware of for this upcoming year?
Interestingly, working in the industry, it's never quiet, right? It's never just like, oh, humdrum, we're going to go about our business and everything's going to be fine. We've had a few very interesting years. But this year is looking to be that much more interesting because we are heading into a prospective strike. And not only are we heading into a prospective WGA strike, there are also negotiations that are happening concurrently with the DGA and with SAG, so two other unions that could be striking after 3 years of COVID. The last proposed strike was 2020, at which point it was, a few months into COVID, nobody wanted to strike. Writers are fighting for very right things, right? At the end of the day, WGA is fighting to ensure that even though the way in which we make content is different, that writers are still able to make a living writing professionally, right? So much has changed. We are doing a lot less network shows, a lot more streamer shows that are a shorter run show, therefore 6, 8, 10 episodes, not 13, 18, 22 episodes, which then translates to a certain number of weeks. There are mini rooms that have become home to developing a lot of shows that are just smaller in size. So we're talking about smaller writers' rooms that last for a shorter period of time. So how does a writer make a full year of living while working shorter rooms now that residuals are gone. So WGA is fighting for a lot of very, very right things, right? A lot of things that are important for the quality of life of writers and the writers that power shows and features. But it's really fascinating to see where the industry is going, how this affects representation, signing non-working writers ahead of the strike. There's certainly a belief that there could be a strike. It is not off the table by any stretch of the imagination. So some people will tell you that there absolutely is going to be a strike. What that is affecting in the immediate is representation first and foremost, and representation for non-working, non-emerged writers yet for a short period of time until we see how the dust settles. Will this affect, are we going to see a slew of rooms suddenly staff up in the next few weeks? Because a lot of buyers want to get scripts written, things done. So we're kind of waiting to see how this all plays, and it will be playing out for the coming months, because the expiration date is May 1st. DGA and SAG are coming up right after. DGA already started the conversations. There's a lot to watch. So if you're like me, a professional industry watcher, it's a fascinating time. But I think for writers who are trying to get attention in the industry, it's an important thing to pay attention to, because you have to think about what is an advantageous time to seek representation, to not seek representation. When is the time to put your head down and focus on content? How should you pace yourself? All of those things will require that much more forethought this year, because it's such a complex year.
Yes. And I know you tapped into some of this, so I think it's expanding on it. So in thinking of that, and with the recognition, the strike could happen, with the recognition of writers having to figure out, how do you create career longevity? How do you create financial security at a time when shows are being shortened and all that? With writers, what should their thought process be going into a strategic approach to looking at a writing career?
It's a lot about the writer that you want to be, identifying your brand, identifying where you can be successful. I always ask writers when writers come to work with me, what are 5 shows that are in line with your pilot from the last 5 years? Name a number of movies that are in line with what you do from the last 5 years. We want to make sure that while everybody wants to go to the next stage in film and TV, whatever it is, that we are evolving with the industry, that there's a place for the career that you want. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to kowtow and model yourself to a career that you're not interested in, but it is about thinking about what is the most market-friendly version of my writing, right? Where is that middle ground between industry viable and passionately important to me? Where do the two meet? Where do I find that place? And strategically thinking about the career that you want to have. So I just talked to somebody this morning who said to me, like, well, should I write a horror film? Everybody talks about how horror films sell. Strategically, that is a terrible decision, because the writer is not interested in horror, doesn't watch horror, doesn't want to write more horror, has one idea. And ultimately, if this writer writes a successful horror script, what are the best case scenarios, right? If we're talking about a feature, it's going to go to a bunch of horror filmmakers who are going to want to talk horror films with this storyteller and potentially want next ideas or develop something together or discuss an assignment that will once again be based in horror, which the writer is not naturally predisposed to, and even more clearly has no interest in. So you really have to think about strategically, where do you fit? Where is your place? There is no wrong place, right? If you want to write Hallmark movies, there is a path for that. It is different than the path of somebody who wants to write studio film, which is different than the path of somebody who wants to write smaller, quirkier, character-driven TV shows, right? Those are just different paths. Now, we can argue that Fleabag has given us a content creator who does do both, and it's not to say there can't be, but you really have to think about what you want to do and what is the path to that, right?
Yeah.
Features, television, today most writers do both. And so it's really important to think about, where do you want to go and how do you get there, rather than I'm doing X and hoping to get to Y.
Excellent. I love it. All right. So there you have it. You have career guidance extraordinaire with Lee Jessup. I want to thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah. And Happy New Year to all.
Happy New Year. May 2023 be exciting and stable.
Yes.